Okay, imagine you're scrolling through ancient history and you stumble across the single biggest oops moment in human civilization. Not a little whoopsie, not a my bad. We're talking about a screw-up so massive that it literally set humanity back 1,000 years. Yeah, 1,000 years. And here on Mystique History, we're diving into the story of the Library of Alexandria, the building that made Google look like a lemonade stand and then went up in flames. Except, plot twist, it didn't just burn once. It maybe burned like 3 or 4 times. And we're still not entirely sure what happened. Buckle up, because this is the story of the greatest tragedy in intellectual history, and somehow nobody can agree on who actually did it. So let's set the scene. It's around 300 BC. Alexander the Great just conquered, well, basically everything. The dude was on an absolute tear. But then his story ended pretty young, and his empire got divvied up like a pizza among his generals. One of those generals, Ptolemy, got Egypt. And Ptolemy had a wild idea. He wanted to build a city that would make every other city look like a truck stop. Enter Alexandria, a glittering port city on the Mediterranean that would become the New York, the Silicon Valley, the Hollywood of the ancient world all rolled into one. But Ptolemy didn't just want monuments and fancy architecture. No. He wanted knowledge, all of it. Every scroll, every text, every piece of wisdom from every corner of the known world. His dream: create the ultimate library. Not just any library, the one library to rule them all. And that's exactly what he did. The Library of Alexandria wasn't just a building with some dusty shelves. This place was a complex. Think of it as part library, part university, part research lab, part museum. It had lecture halls, gardens, dining rooms, and living quarters for scholars. Basically, it was the ancient world's version of a tech campus, except instead of free kombucha and ping-pong tables, you got philosophical debates and geometry lessons. The Ptolemies threw insane amounts of money at this thing. They wanted to collect every single piece of written knowledge that existed, and I mean every single piece. Here's where it gets kind of crazy. The Ptolemies were so obsessed with collecting texts that they basically became intellectual pirates. Ships would roll into Alexandria's harbor, right? Standard trade stuff. But the port authorities had a special policy. They'd search every ship for books, scrolls, any written material. And when they found something, they'd confiscate it. Straight up take it. They'd bring it to the library, have scribes make a copy, and then they'd give the ship owners the copy and keep the original. Imagine you're a merchant just trying to deliver some pottery, and the government's like, cool vase, bro, but we're going to need that recipe scroll you've got in the captain's quarters. That's some next-level aggressive collection strategy right there. And it worked. Within a few decades, the Library of Alexandria had somewhere between 400,000 to 700,000 scrolls. Now, these aren't books like we think of books. A scroll might contain one play, one mathematical treatise, one medical text, so we're talking about what could be hundreds of thousands of individual works. To put that in perspective, that's more information than most people would encounter in their entire lives back then. This was the ancient world's internet, except you couldn't just Google something. You had to actually walk to the library, ask a librarian, and hope they knew which scroll you needed. Imagine trying to find anything. Yeah, I'm looking for that thing Aristotle wrote about. Stuff? Good luck, buddy. But here's what made the library truly revolutionary. It wasn't just a storage facility, it was a research institute. The best minds from across the Mediterranean world came to Alexandria to study, to learn, to teach, to discover. The Ptolemies literally paid scholars to just exist there. They gave them salaries, free room and board, and access to all the knowledge in the world. It's like getting paid to binge read while living in a palace. Sign me up. The names that walked those halls? Absolutely legendary. Euclid showed up and basically invented the geometry we still use today. You know, that thing you suffered through in high school? Yeah, Thank Euclid. His book Elements became the math textbook for like 2,000 years. Archimedes, the dude who figured out water displacement in a bathtub and ran through the streets yelling, "Eureka!" He studied Alexandrian texts. Eratosthenes, who worked as the head librarian at one point, did something absolutely wild. Using nothing but shadows, geometry, and pure brain power, he calculated the circumference of Earth in 240 BC, and he was only off by like 2%. The dude didn't have satellites or GPS. He had sticks, math, and audacity. Meanwhile, people wouldn't even believe the Earth was round again for over 1,000 years after this place disappeared. Let that sink in. Hipparchus was mapping stars and predicting eclipses with scary accuracy. Herophilos was doing early medical research that would influence medicine for centuries. We're talking about a concentration of genius that wouldn't be matched until maybe the Renaissance. Every major scientific advancement, every mathematical breakthrough, every philosophical development happening anywhere in the known world, it all flowed through Alexandria. This wasn't just a library, it was the engine of human progress. And here's the kicker. We think there were texts in there from civilizations we barely even remember today. Babylonian astronomy, Persian philosophy, Indian mathematics, African engineering, Egyptian medicine that was thousands of years old even back then. You know what's wild? Ancient Egyptian civilization was already ancient to the people using this library. Cleopatra, the famous one, lived closer in time to the iPhone than to the building of the Great Pyramids. Mind blown. And the library had texts trying to decode and preserve that even more ancient knowledge. Imagine if we had a library today that contained detailed records from Atlantis or whatever. That's the level we're talking about. Now here's where things get heartbreaking. We know there were hundreds of works in that library that are just gone, vanished, poof. We know they existed because other ancient writers referenced them, quoted from them, argued about them. But the actual texts, lost forever. There were plays by Sophocles and Euripides that we'll never read. There were books by Aristotle that didn't survive. There were astronomical calculations, medical treatments, engineering techniques, historical accounts, poetry, philosophy, all erased from existence. Think about it like this. Imagine if tomorrow the internet just disappeared. All of Wikipedia gone. YouTube gone. Every digital book, every research paper, every movie, every song, just completely wiped. That's what happened to the ancient world when Alexandria's library was lost. Except worse, because there were no backups, no cloud storage, no secondary copies sitting in some server in Iceland. When a scroll turned to ash in Alexandria, that knowledge just ended. And here's the thing that keeps historians up at night. We don't even know what we don't know. There are probably thousands of texts we don't even have records of. Books that were so completely erased that we don't even know they existed to miss them. Somewhere in that library might have been the cure to diseases we're still fighting, mathematical principles that could have accelerated technology by centuries, historical accounts that would answer questions we're still debating. We lost an alternate timeline of human development, and we'll never know what could have been. Some scholars think there might have been detailed records of ancient civilizations that we only know through myths now. What if there were actual historical accounts of the Sea Peoples, or detailed maps of ancient trade routes, or scientific treatises that wouldn't be discovered again until the Renaissance? The Roman scholar Pliny the Elder mentioned a whopping 146 Roman authors in his encyclopedia. We have complete works from maybe 7 of them. The rest? Gone. And that's just Roman authors. Imagine the Egyptian, Greek, Persian, and other texts we lost. The library represented something humanity had never achieved before and wouldn't achieve again for over 1,000 years. The systematic collection and preservation of all human knowledge in one place. It was the ancient world's backup drive, the collective memory of civilization, and when it was lost, It was like humanity got amnesia. The Dark Ages weren't just dark because of political collapse. They were dark because the light of knowledge had literally been extinguished. Now, and this is where the story gets really frustrating, we don't actually know exactly how the library was lost. There's no single dramatic moment we can point to, no clear villain, no definitive "and that's when it happened" event. Instead, it's this murky, complicated mess of possible disasters spread out over centuries, and historians still argue about what actually went down. It's like a murder mystery, except the victim is human knowledge, and there are like 4 different suspects who all kind of did it. The first suspect, Julius Caesar, yeah, that's Caesar. In 48 BC, Caesar was in Alexandria dealing with some political drama involving Cleopatra and her brother. Things got messy. There was a military situation in the harbor. Caesar ordered his ships to set some enemy ships on fire. Standard ancient combat tactics. Except the fire spread. It jumped to the docks, then to warehouses, and according to some ancient writers, it reached part of the library complex, or at least some warehouses storing scrolls meant for the library. Some accounts say 40,000 scrolls were lost. Others say it was just some warehouses, not the main library. Caesar himself never mentioned it, which, suspicious, or maybe it wasn't that big a deal at the time. We honestly don't know. But here's the thing, the library definitely continued to exist after Caesar's little fire incident. Scholars kept working there for centuries afterward, so if Caesar did do some damage, it wasn't fatal. It was more like the library got a really bad injury but survived, for a while. Next suspect, the rise of Christianity in the Roman Empire. By the 4th century AD, Christianity became the official religion, and some of the early Christian leaders, they weren't exactly fans of pagan knowledge. There are accounts of Christian mobs in Alexandria targeting pagan temples and institutions. In 391 AD, the Serapeum, a temple that housed part of the library's collection, was taken over and possibly cleared out. Some historians think this is when a massive chunk of the library's texts were lost. But again, we're not sure. The accounts are vague, biased, and contradictory. It's possible the library was already in decline by then anyway. Then there's the Islamic conquest of Egypt in the 640s AD. There's a famous story that Caliph Omar ordered the library to be cleared out, saying, "If the books agree with the Quran, they are unnecessary. If they disagree, they are heretical. Either way, they should go." And supposedly the scrolls were used as fuel for bathhouses for 6 months. It's a dramatic story. It's also probably not true. Modern historians think this account was made up centuries later to make Muslims look bad during the Crusades. There's no contemporary evidence for it. And by the 640s, the library had probably already been gone for a couple hundred years anyway. So what actually happened? Honestly, probably all of it. And none of it. The Library of Alexandria didn't have one dramatic ending. It had a slow, painful decline. Funding dried up. Political instability made scholarship less of a priority. Fires, both accidental and intentional, chipped away at the collection. Scrolls degraded naturally over time. Papyrus doesn't last forever. The empire fractured. Priorities shifted. And slowly, over centuries, the greatest collection of knowledge the world had ever seen just faded away. It's less of a murder and more of a slow, tragic neglect, which somehow makes it even sadder. By the way, if you're anything like me and you're sitting here absolutely furious that we lost all this knowledge, maybe hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our other deep dives into history's biggest mysteries and tragedies. Just a thought. The real tragedy isn't just that we lost the texts, it's what the loss represents. When Alexandria's library declined, it wasn't just books disappearing, it was the idea disappearing. The idea that knowledge should be collected, preserved, shared freely. The idea that learning itself was valuable, that understanding the world was worth investing in. For the next 1,000 years, that idea basically evaporated from Europe. Knowledge became fragmented, locked away in monasteries, controlled by religious authorities, lost in wars and invasions. And get this, during the Islamic Golden Age, from about the 8th to the 14th centuries, Muslim scholars were translating and preserving ancient Greek and Roman texts that had been lost in Europe. They were doing what Alexandria had done, collecting knowledge from everywhere, translating it, building on it. And when those texts finally made their way back to Europe during the Renaissance, it kicked off the scientific revolution. Europe basically had to relearn things that had been figured out over 1,000 years earlier. That's the cost of losing Alexandria, a millennium of lost progress. Think about where humanity could be right now if we hadn't lost that knowledge, if the scientific method had continued unbroken from ancient Greece through the Middle Ages, if medical knowledge had kept advancing, if mathematical and astronomical discoveries had built on each other without a 1,000-year gap. We might be 1,000 years more advanced than we are right now. We might have cured cancer in the 1800s. We might have gone to space in the Renaissance. We might have had the internet in the Victorian era, or maybe not. Maybe it wouldn't have mattered. But the fact that we'll never know is what haunts us. The Library of Alexandria represents the fragility of knowledge. We think of information as permanent now. It's backed up, copied, stored in 100 different places. But even now, we're losing things. Websites disappear. Old file formats become unreadable. Digital archives get corrupted. Companies go under and take their data with them. We're just as vulnerable as Alexandria was. We just don't realize it yet. The library's story is a warning. Knowledge isn't permanent. Progress isn't guaranteed. Civilization is more fragile than we want to believe. And there's something poetic about it too. The greatest library in the ancient world, the place that held all of human knowledge, and we can't even agree on what happened to it. The story of knowledge was lost along with the knowledge itself. It's like the universe playing a cosmic joke on us. You wanted to preserve everything? Cool. Now you can't even preserve the story of how you lost it all. But here's the thing. The Library of Alexandria, even in its absence, changed the world. The idea of it inspired every library, university, and research institution that came after. When people talk about preserving knowledge, they're channeling the spirit of Alexandria. The Internet Archive trying to preserve websites before they disappear. That's Alexandria. Wikipedia trying to collect all human knowledge in one accessible place. That's Alexandria. Every public library, every university library, every effort to make knowledge free and accessible, they're all echoes of what the Ptolemies tried to do over 2,000 years ago. The library proved that knowledge has value beyond profit, beyond politics, beyond religion, that understanding the world for its own sake matters, that learning from the past helps build the future. And even though the building is gone, even though the scrolls turned to dust, that idea survived. It survived the Dark Ages, the medieval period, the Renaissance, the modern era. It survives today every time someone fights for education, for libraries, for open access to information. So yeah, the Library of Alexandria was lost. But what it represented, that's immortal. And maybe that's the real legacy. Not the scrolls themselves, but the principle behind them. That knowledge is precious, that it's worth preserving, that it's worth fighting for, and that when we lose it, we lose part of what makes us human. The Library of Alexandria didn't just hold the past, it held possible futures. Futures we'll never see now. And that's the tragedy. Not just what was lost, but what could have been. When those flames consumed those scrolls, or when time and neglect turned them to dust, humanity didn't just lose its memory. It lost potential timelines where we were smarter, more advanced, more enlightened. So here's my challenge to you. The Library of Alexandria is gone. We can't get it back, but we can make sure it never happens again. Support your local libraries. Push for open access to research. Back up your data. Share knowledge freely, teach what you know, learn what you don't. Because the alternative is another dark age, and we've already had one of those. If this story made you think, made you angry, made you want to preserve knowledge yourself, drop a comment below about what piece of knowledge you think is most worth preserving for future generations. What modern book, discovery, or idea would you want saved if everything else disappeared? And hit that subscribe button to join us here at Mystique History as we keep diving into the stories that shaped our world, the mysteries that still haunt us, and the lessons that history keeps trying to teach us. Because in the end, the Library of Alexandria taught us the most important lesson of all. When knowledge burns, humanity goes dark, and we can't let that happen again.